Good evening. My name is Brooke Pear, and I'm the Financial Aid Counselor for Pinellas County School District. In my role, I work with students and families with scholarship opportunities such as the Bright Future Scholarship Program, as well as financial aid such as the FAFSA. Tonight, we will be discussing what you need to do after you've completed the FAFSA or the federal free application for federal student aid. Tonight, I have joined with me my colleagues Jamie Wasserman and Jeffrey Smith. You may have tuned in to our last Facebook Live presentation that we had in December, and then we had an encore of that in January. In that presentation, we covered the basics of what you needed to do and know to get ready to complete the FAFSA. Tonight's presentation, as I mentioned, will cover what to do afterward. Now, if you didn't attend the last session or you haven't completed the FAFSA, I still think you're going to find this session valuable because it will let you know what you need to do once you do get that started. If you feel like you need to review the steps prior that were covered, we do have a copy of our last presentation on our website, which is pcsb.org/FAFSA. I also want to let you know that this presentation tonight is also being recorded, and it will also be available at that same website. Before I begin, I do want Jamie and Jeffrey to introduce themselves. Jamie, do you want to start?
Sure. Hi, my name's Jamie Wasserman. I'm a school counselor at Pinellas Park High School.
Jeffrey?
Hello, my name is Jeffrey Smith, and I'm the Assistant Director of Financial Aid at Eckerd College.
Great. Thanks to both of you, and thanks for joining me tonight. Our goal tonight is to provide our PCS seniors and their families with necessary tools and information so that you know what to do after you've completed the FAFSA. So you're ready to make sure not only that you've completed it, but that everything is in order and you're ready for the next steps. So we're going to get started by doing a brief presentation that goes over the important information, and then afterwards we will have a question and answer section. As we're going through the presentation, please feel free to submit your questions on the website, and we'll get to them afterwards. Okay, so let's get started. So you filled out the FAFSA, what's next? After you've completed the FAFSA, the next big step is reviewing your student aid report, or your SAR, S-A-R. Essentially, it's a summary of the information you provided on the FAFSA, but it is not a financial aid offer. So those will be things that you will get from the college. Now, if you provided an email, you will have access to your report 3 to 5 days after you completed it if you also signed it electronically. If you used a signature page and mailed it, then it's going to take about 2 weeks. Either way, though, you will receive an email instructions on how to get to your student aid report online. Now, if you did not provide an email, it will take 7 to 10 days if you had an electronic signature. And again, if you didn't sign electronically and instead mailed that signature page, it will take about 2 weeks. Now, regardless of how you've completed it, if you have an FSA ID, you will be able to review your report on FAFSA.gov following about the same timeline as mentioned above. So what information does the student aid report contain? You will find that it contains your expected family contribution, or EFC, your data release number, or DRN, your Pell Grant eligibility, and if you've been selected for verification. So let's look at those a little more closely. So your EFC, as I said, is your expected family contribution, and it's the index number that college financial aid staff use to determine how much financial aid you'll receive if you attend their school. Your EFC takes into consideration things such as your family's taxed and untaxed income, assets and benefits, as well as family size and number of family members in college. Now, the EFC is not the amount you have to pay for college. It is a number used by the school to calculate how much aid you're eligible for. And when you're looking at your student aid report, you will find this number on the top right of your report. If it's blank, it means that you have some incomplete information that you'll need to complete to get that information. So next up is the data release number, or DRN. And again, this is also in the upper right-hand corner just above the EFC. So if you have information on your FAFSA that you want to have your college update for you, so you have something to update, you will need to provide them with this number. Typically, this would be like if you've provided an incorrect Social Security number, you can request that the college you're going to attend update this for you. Next, we're going to talk about federal Pell Grant eligibility. So what you'll find on your report is if you are possibly going to be eligible for a Pell Grant. And this is awarded to undergraduate students who have exceptional financial need. For the 21-22 year, the maximum Pell Grant is $6,495. You'll also have that information. So on the report, you'll see if you're eligible, and they will say about what they expect you to be eligible for. And this is listed under the federal student aid eligibility section. If you're eligible for a Pell Grant, you'll receive the full amount you qualify for. Each school participating in the program receives enough funds for each year. So in other words, this is not one, we sometimes talk about grants that are first come, first serve. With the Pell, if what you're eligible for is what you can receive. So the next thing to talk about is if you are selected for verification. So verification, you will notice on your report, if you have an asterisk next to your EFC, it means that you have been selected for verification. Now, if this happens, don't take it personally. The Department of Education picks a portion of all financial applicants to go through this process. And so essentially, this process is where you're going to have to provide additional information to the school about your financials. In addition to the asterisk, you'll also see a note under your application status indicating you've been selected. So that's something really important when you're reviewing your student aid report, is be sure to look for that, because it does mean that you're going to be required to provide some more information. And the process is to confirm the accuracy of key components of your FAFSA. You'll be told by your school to provide certain documents. It might be like a tax return transcript, or you might need to provide some verification of the number in college by showing a proof in enrollment. You might just be asked to do a FAFSA verification worksheet and not required to do anything else. So you just need to check with your school to find that out. So that is, when it's on the student aid report, then that's because you've been selected by the DOE. In addition, your college can also select you for verification. So you also want to be sure to keep track and respond to correspondence that you get from your college in case that occurs. So that gives you kind of the understanding of the student aid report, and I'm going to turn it over to Jamie now, who's going to talk to you about making corrections on your form.
Perfect. Thank you. So when you're reviewing your student aid report, you may notice that there's something incorrect that you'd like to change. There's 3 ways that you can update your information. You can do it electronically by logging back in to FAFSA.gov. You can do it via mail by making the corrections on the student aid report, or you can check with your post-secondary institution and ask them to make those changes for you. The most efficient way is to make the changes electronically. You can do this by logging back into your FAFSA at FAFSA.gov. You're going to select the login button, enter your FSA ID. Under the My FAFSA page, select Make Corrections, and then electronically sign as the student when making the changes. If you do make changes to a parent information, they will also sign that document electronically as they did when you initially submitted it. You can also make changes on the student aid report, the paper copy. You can just indicate your changes and mail them. Any changes made this way will take between 2 to 3 weeks to be reflected. So it is much quicker if you can remember how to log in on the FAFSA.gov website. But you can also make them on the student aid report. And then the last way to make changes is you can check with your post-secondary institution or college, and they can log in and change some information for you as long as you have that data release information that you give them. So there's certain things that you can change and certain things you can't change. Any of the contact information, your name, your address, phone number, those things can be changed. There are other things that are a snapshot in time on FAFSA that you can't change. So like if the amount in your savings account or one of those types of numbers change, those cannot be updated. If you happen to file your FAFSA with an incorrect Social Security number, You can ask your college to update that for you, or you can resubmit a FAFSA with the correct Social Security number, which is what is recommended, and it is the quickest way to update that. As I said before, things that you can update, your mailing address, your email address, and your contact information. You can also update anything that's going to change your dependency status. So if you're now in a legal guardianship situation, that's something that can be changed. If there's a change in your own marital status, you have to report that to your college, and they can help and let you know if that needs to be updated. As Ms. Pear mentioned, if you're selected for verification, you might also need to update information related to family size and status. One other thing to mention is when you fill out FAFSA electronically, you're limited to 10 colleges or universities. If you want to share that information with more than 10 colleges, you can update that list. You will have to remove a school and then add an additional because you are maxed out at 10 schools. And you are able to see when schools download that information so that you don't delete one before it's been accessed. So that's just information on how you can update some of the information that you include on the student aid report. And now I'm going to pass it on.
Yeah.
Okay, Jeffrey.
All right. Follow up with schools. It's very important that you take this step and follow up with the schools if you have any questions to the financial aid office, but also be sure that you always check your email, your personal email, to see what correspondence that the schools that you've sent your FAFSA to receive, to get your FAFSA report, to see what correspondence they've sent you if there's some documents that that particular school is requiring that you send them. So always be aware and checking your emails pretty much on a daily basis. You want to do that to be sure that there's not anything that you need to get to one of the schools that you've chosen to receive your results. Next is we're going to talk about is professional judgment. Professional judgment is given to the financial aid administrators to make adjustments to certain data elements on the FAFSA form that can impact the EFC. This is very important that you get in contact with the schools that you're considering for professional judgment and get those documents in because of, maybe some institutional aid that you weren't previously eligible for that you may be eligible for once the professional judgment is completed. After you submitted your FAFSA, contact the financial aid office at the schools you applied to and sent your FAFSA if your family situation has changed in a major way, especially what we're all dealing with now with the pandemic. A lot of incomes and things like that have changed, or people may have lost their jobs temporarily or permanently, and they're not sure what they're going to do. So that's a definite situation that you can have professional judgment done. Next, we will talk about dependency override. Dependency override allows for the financial aid administrators to change a student's status from a dependent to independent on the FAFSA due to unusual circumstances. And if you have a situation like that, be sure you have documentation so you can send copies to a school or to your various schools that are going to consider doing a dependency override. So it's important to have letterhead that details your situation, your unusual circumstance, for the school to deeply consider your dependency override. And after you've submitted your FAFSA, contact the financial aid office at the schools, as we said, and that you sent your FAFSA to. And just be sure that, like I said, usually most schools are going to require several documents as opposed to one. And one of the key places that you can get information from with your unusual circumstance would be your high school, or your guidance counselor. That would definitely be a key place to where you can get, documentation that the schools or colleges will accept. Next, we're going to talk about applying for scholarships. The FAFSA is one aspect of financial aid and not everything. You may have a gap between your financial aid being offered and what the school costs. So scholarships can fill this gap. So you want to be sure that you're doing your research and applying for as many outside scholarships as possible. I'm a bit, big deal on when I talk to parents and students about the law of averages. You don't want to just apply for a few outside scholarships. You want to apply for as many as possible. So eventually, you're going to probably receive a scholarship if you're out there applying for quite a few of them. The other thing is you want to review scholarship opportunities that are listed on the Pinellas County School Board's website, as you see here, posted here. So be sure you go out to the Pinellas County School Board Financial Aid website and do your research there as well. Another one that a lot of colleges use is FastWeb. That's another huge scholarship search engine that you might want to consider searching for scholarships as well. Check with the colleges for scholarship opportunities that you're considering on attending. A lot of times people think the scholarships come through financial aid. You really want to talk to your admissions side of the college for scholarships, along with the financial aid department. So a lot of scholarships do come through the admissions department, as well as at my institution, one of the big schools that we have is marine biology. So you want to check with your focus that you're planning on pursuing in college, because some scholarships will come through your focus that you're planning on pursuing. Also review and apply for state scholarships and grant programs at the Florida Student Financial Aid website. As you see here, it's the Florida Student Financial Aid .org website you want to go to and check for state scholarships through the state of Florida. There are various scholarships out there that you may be eligible for that you may not be aware of. Also use the Navient scholarship search in your Navient account. You want to be sure to do that and search for scholarships. And also, some parents may not realize that maybe your employment may have scholarships on their website where your parents work. So that's another opportunity to search for scholarships.
Great, and thanks so much to both of you. I know this is a lot of information, so I do want to remind you that we are recording this session, and the materials will be available on our website, pcsb.org/FAFSA, which is also on the bottom of the screen. So we do have some questions that have come in, so I'm going to start going through those. And again, if you have questions, please submit them online, and we'll get to them. So I think, Jeffrey, I'm going to send this back to you because this is one of the items you talked about, the professional judgment. What do I do if my parents' financial situation has changed after submitting my FAFSA? Can I update this information?
Absolutely. You definitely want to contact the colleges that you're seriously considering attending. So even though you may have chosen 10 schools, you may have narrowed it down to maybe 2 or 3 schools that you're planning on seriously considering, because you may not want to send all your information to to a lot of schools. But every financial aid office is a little different on how they handle professional judgment. So it's always good to contact those separate colleges' financial aid office to find out what is their procedure and what policies do they have in order to help you and assist you with professional judgment.
Great. Yeah, so I think the big point there is you're going to complete the FAFSA with your information. So you're not going to update the FAFSA information, but you're going to contact the schools and let them know, and they'll look at the professional judgment. I haven't filled out my FAFSA yet. Is it too late to start? Jamie, you want to?
Definitely not, but sooner is better. The sooner that you have that information and that the schools that you're considering have that information, the quicker that you'll have information on what your financial aid package might look like, and then you can start, looking for scholarships and things to bridge that gap. There's a couple of events coming up where you can get assistance with that, and definitely look at the website, and that'll be posted again at the end. If you need assistance completing it, reach out to your school counselor. There's district resources, but the sooner the better, so you can kind of move forward with your planning.
Yeah, so absolutely know that you can still do that, but yeah, there are going to be some things that are first come, first serve. So as Jamie said, the sooner the better. So the next one is, what if my expected family contribution is higher than I expected? So I'm going to speak to that, but also feel free to chime in. So that, I would think, is probably a fairly common concern. Parents look at that number and think, you know, I'm not able to pay that much for college. I think the first thing is trying to determine, is it higher than expected, like you feel like there could be an error that's been made? And so first and foremost, what I would suggest is you're going to get that student aid report, and you're going to be able to look through and see the questions and how you answer them. So, some that I think I hear often get, students may answer incorrectly, is the number of students in college. Sometimes the student should be including themselves on that, and sometimes they don't do that, and so that can result in that. But then there are some times where, of course, that is what has been determined, and that's when we look at knowing that this is one part of your financial aid is the FAFSA, but there are scholarships and so forth, and to look at that. Does anybody else want to add to that if a student comes across that situation?
Yeah, you mentioned like error. A lot of times it is a lot to do with an error that was made on the FAFSA when that happens. One, error that I see quite often is where the student may have reported their income the same as their parents and taxes paid. So that's a common error that you see a lot, so things like that could be, because I've fixed a lot of those and helped people realize, oh, wow, I didn't realize that, they had done something like that. And, another thing, like you said too, is the number of children in college is a common mistake as well. So, but definitely those are some common mistakes that we can easily fix and really get down to the nuts and bolts as to what you're eligible for.
Yeah.
I've also had several families come in that didn't use the IRS data retrieval tool, and there were just manual entry errors and typing numbers, or they entered the same number twice. So if possible, and you use the IRS data retrieval, you're going to have a lot fewer entry errors when you're putting your numbers in, and transposing. So instead of it being 36, it's 63, and that's going to make a big difference in what your EFC is when you're reporting your income. So when possible, do that, and then definitely check the numbers on the student aid report and make sure that what you entered from your tax information is accurate.
Yeah, that reminds me too, because they don't use decimals, so you don't put,
Right.
if you're saying I have $135.23 in my checking account, they're going to read that as 1,300 and some. So you're going to round those and not put in the change, because that could definitely cause a problem. So again, it really is. I think when I talk to students and families, a lot of times it's kind of like, I got the FAFSA done. I'm done with that. And that's why we're having this session, to really point out how important it is afterwards to go back and check those things and make sure everything's in place. So this is a question I think is pretty common. Why was I selected for verification? Anybody want to?
Well, as we said, as we spoke about this, is, the Department of Education randomly will select people for verification, and we have no choice but to, to fulfill that requirement that the Federal Department of Education requires us to. And then there's times, because like we said, of an error. If there's an error on the FAFSA and say taxes paid, where I've seen where people have made an error where they put their AGI and their taxes paid the same. So that kind of shows that you didn't have any income. So situations like that could cause, why you are selected as well. As Jamie shared, if you can use the data retrieval tool, which is what we encourage people to do, a lot of times it'll eliminate you being selected or having any errors on your FAFSA report.
Yeah, very, very true. And like we said in the presentation, is don't take it personally. A lot of that, when it's done by the DOE, is just a random. They have to, I'm not sure what, is it a third? Is it how many?
Yes, it's like every 1 in 3.
Yeah, they have to do 1 in 3. They have to select for verification just to make sure that the process is, being considered. But, so don't take it personally, but definitely do provide the information. Be sure to look through, like I said, any correspondence that you get from your college. As Jeffrey said, be sure to check your email on a regular basis, because I think when you're in high school, you kind of are used to probably having your counselor come and say, hey, you need to do this, and then remind you again and remind you again. But a lot of times, because especially if you're looking at some of these large colleges, they're going to send you that email, and you're going to need to be able to check that.
And not just check your personal email once you apply to the college and you have a college email. I've had a couple of students just this semester that were selected for verification at SPC, but they didn't realize that they had an SPC email. So they've been getting these constant reminders with the verification documentation as requested, but they're not logging into their college email account to see that. So as you apply to colleges, every school is going to create a student email for you. So it's important that, you log in and do those documents. And being selected for verification does not mean you're disqualified from federal aid. And I think that's what some students think is, well, they want to check, so that means I did something wrong. We're just reminding you, 1 in 3, it's going to happen. So it's likely that one of the 4 years that you're in school, if you go to a bachelor's degree program, you're going to get picked for verification.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to answer this because this was part of my presentation. How long does it take to get my student aid report after I submit the FAFSA? So it does depend on how you submitted the FAFSA and if you signed electronically or if you printed the signature page and then signed it. If you did an electronic FAFSA, signed it electronically, then it's 3 to 5 days, and you provide an email, then you're going to get an email saying, here's a link to your student aid report. Now, if you do the signature page, it's going to be about 2 weeks. And if you don't provide an email, as we mentioned, you're going to get something in the mail, and it's either going to be your student aid report or a student aid report acknowledgement. And that can take about 7 to 10 days if you electronically signed. So if you're finding that, you think that you should have already had that, does anybody have advice if I say, oh, it's been 4 weeks, I haven't got anything in the mail, I haven't got an email, I log on to my FAFSA and I don't see a report? Anybody have advice on that?
Well, I always encourage students just to contact one of the college's financial aid office that you applied for, because we're more than happy to help, resolve those issues, because we know it could be very taxing, and, it can get kind of worrisome, and, so whatever, we can do to help, just reach out to one of the financial aid offices of the college that you applied to and had your FAFSA report sent to. And that's, to me, the best option to get some assistance to get that resolved.
Yeah, thank you. Very true. So how does the Florida prepaid factor into your FAFSA? I can talk a little bit about that, but we can all go around. So it will be listed with the, if it's, well, I guess it depends on who is the owner of the prepaid. If it's the parent or the student, then it's going to be listed with the parent's information. If it is a grandparent, then it's not part of the FAFSA, but it will be part of the student's income, correct? So, and so with the parents, it's going to be part of this, the assets, essentially, the worth of that prepaid?
More the 529 plans are, I believe, and like you said, that depends on whose names, whose name it's in. So if it's in the student's name, then the 529 would be. The Florida prepaid, pretty much at Eckerd College, where I work, the business office handles the Florida prepaid and gives them how much of the Florida prepaid can go to a private institution. And it could be different at a state university or community college. So the best thing to do would be to probably contact that school's business office to find out exactly how they handle Florida prepaid at that institution. Because I think people do it a little different. But when you're talking about assets, counting assets, it's the 529 plan, and it depends on if it's in the student's name, then it counts as assets on that student's behalf.
Or if it's a parent.
Or it's a parent, right, it's on their assets, yeah.
Okay. I tried to use the IRS link, and it wouldn't let me. Is there a reason why it would not work?
Well, I know being that I work at a college, we always get calls, but we always have to remind parents and students, it's the federal government, Department of Education. So that's really kind of out of our hands. So you would, I know the number by heart, 1-800-433-3243. And so if you just call the FAFSA number or get in, contact with IRS, it's just better to call the FAFSA 1-800 number to try to get that resolved. Usually in that situation, we found that they're updating the system. And maybe at the time you tried to use the data retrieval tool, there was an issue with updating. Another situation could be that if someone has filed bankruptcy or there was a fraud situation on a parent's account, IRS account, then that's another reason why the data retrieval probably couldn't have been used for that parent. We have a lot of situation with fraud,
I got
tax fraud. So that's what I've seen more than anything than bankruptcy or anything like that. It's usually a fraud situation. So you won't be able to use the data retrieval tool if somebody's had a fraud situation.
There's also certain filing statuses. I think married filing separately is
Right.
one that you can't use the IRS
Correct.
data retrieval tool on. And then if you have certain schedules attached to your tax return, then you also can't use the IRS data retrieval. So the more complicated your taxes are, the less likely it is that it's going to connect. But you always want to try that first to see if it will go through. If you've also filed an amended tax return, then it likely won't let you use the IRS data retrieval tool. Those are the ones that we found most common. And then also, if there's any kind of a fraud alert on your credit report, it won't let it go through.
To follow up with the amended, I learned this a couple of years ago when that happened. They will sometimes allow the parent to use the data retrieval tool if they've amended it. They require us as a school to get the amended return. So there's a new error code on there where they'll pretty much use the data retrieval tool, but then that code tells me that I have to get the amended return from the parent in order to confirm it. But there are times where that data retrieval tool can be used with an amended return. Yeah.
That's great. And, and I'm thinking, I believe it's pretty particular. So like, if I am a parent and I'm trying to use the data retrieval tool and I spell out street
Right.
on in the FAFSA, but then on my tax return, I put ST or,
If you leave an apartment number out,
Right.
you
yeah.
don't
Yeah.
spell out
So
the city.
there's also that. So that
It has to match identically.
Yeah, very picky.
So I think probably you need to look at your, if you're having that issue and you think that could, you're like, well, it's not, I didn't, because in the FAFSA, it's going to tell you, here are reasons why you cannot use it. So you're going to be able to kind of eliminate, well, no, it's not because of my filing status or those types of things. And then I think some of those things would be what you want to look for and maybe start by looking at your tax return and looking exactly how you enter that information. So, okay, great. Jamie, you covered this, so I want to swing this over to you. I accidentally put the wrong social security number on FAFSA. Can I fix that?
Definitely. The quickest and most efficient way to fix that is just to file a new FAFSA with the correct social security number. That's the recommended way if you look on the FAFSA help pages. Another way you can do it is you can reach out to the college that you plan on attending, and they can try to update that for you. So those would be the two ways that you can update that information. Again, the quickest is if you can do it online and file an additional return. It will change the date that your FAFSA is filed, but it'll guarantee that the information is submitted the quickest way.
Great, thank you. I'm going to take this one because I know the answer. Is this information available in Spanish? And I'm going to cover some of this at the end, but yes, we are going to be having this same presentation in Spanish on March 9th at 7. So I'm going to go over this at the end, but if you go to facebook.com PCSB Espanol, that's where you're going to be able to watch this presentation in Spanish. So, and we're glad to be able to offer that service for you. Can I add a college to my FAFSA after I've already submitted it?
Definitely. You just log back in. You can list up to 10 at a time. So as I said before, if you have more than 10 listed, you would have to delete one to add one. Log back in, FAFSA.gov, make updates, submit, you re-sign it electronically, and you're good to go. And it should take about a week before the colleges pull that information down. You might want to let them know that you've added it if they've told you originally that they can't see it.
And you may have said this, and I was looking down, but you also, when you do make any of those updates, just be sure to do it will prompt you, but you want to electronically sign that
Right.
again so that it's resubmitted. Okay, looking at my USF financial aid package, they listed federal unsubsidized direct loan amounts. These are the loans to the student, correct?
Correct. Yep, those are, yep. Those, when you do the FAFSA application and you list the schools on there, pretty much most schools now will automatically have those loans on there that you're eligible for. The subsidized and unsubsidized, if you are eligible for the combination of both or just the unsub. But those are just loans that the student are eligible for, not parents.
And so then if the parent, that would be the Parent Plus loan,
Yeah.
that would be in the parent's name if they decided to do that. But I think this is a really important point, because for parents especially, is to understand that students are going to, if they choose to accept these, and they do not have to, they are going to have loans in their name and be responsible for them. So it's really important to do some education, with students about doing this responsibly, and knowing that when you get your financial aid package, that you don't have to accept everything on there. I mean, obviously, if you want to accept the free money, like your grants and scholarships, but if you're given federal loans, that if you don't require those, then you can say, no, I'm going to not accept those, or maybe I'll accept my subsidized, but not my unsubsidized. Does anyone want to kind of explain the difference between those two?
I will start by saying that the total amount of those subsidized and unsubsidized loans available to the student is capped. And it goes up each year, but I think it's limited, I think it's like $6,250 the first year or something, like it's capped at what can be offered federally. So if you're at a school that costs more than that, then you would be looking for private loans. The difference between subsidized and unsubsidized has to do with how the interest is paid when you're in school. If you have a subsidized loan, the interest is not accruing on that loan until 6 months after you graduate. So it's being paid during that time. If it's an unsubsidized loan, that interest accrues while you're in school. So if you're not making payments and you borrowed $5,000, by the time you start making payments, it now might be a $5,700 loan. Those are raw numbers, not any kind of percentage or anything, but just giving you an idea that the amount that you're paying back is going to be more when you have an unsubsidized loan, because that interest is accruing each month that you're in school. I mean, that's a very basic explanation. I don't know, Jeff, if you want to.
Yeah, the loan limits, whether it's combined or all just unsub, because some students would be eligible for both sub and unsub, and some students are only going to be eligible for the unsub. Your freshman year, before origination fees are taken out, because a lot of people don't realize that the federal government takes out, Department of Education takes out origination fees, but the loan limit for your freshman year is $5,500. Your sophomore year is $6,500, and then for your junior and senior years, it's $7,500. So those are the loan limits that are, like she said, they're capped. So you can't borrow any more than that as a student. The only other way you can borrow some additional money is if you go the private loan route and get your parents or someone to co-sign on your behalf, or your parent is going to just borrow the money themselves for you. Or they can choose to do the federal Parent Plus loan, and they can borrow whatever your student's aid is not covering, scholarships, or whatever they receive is not being covered, then they can borrow the remaining amount in a federal Parent Plus loan or a private loan to cover the remaining cost for the year.
Okay, well, thank you. I think that's the end of our questions. I want to thank Jamie and Jeffrey for their assistance tonight, and thank you for everyone that's tuned in. I hope that you found this helpful. I know that as you complete the FAFSA, you'll likely run into additional questions, so we do have some resources we're going to put up on the screen. where you can get additional help. So a lot of information up there, but essentially, if you go to that pcsb.org/FAFSA, you're going to find links to all of that information we have listed. And if you go to that website, you're also going to find, I think we're going to have a slide that shows you, but there's a blue bar in the middle of the page, and it is where you can submit a question or request an appointment. So you can go there. So as you're going through this process, feel free to come to this page and submit your question. I do want to give you some information. We talked already about the Spanish event, but I do want to go over some, our final slide that goes over some upcoming events. First of all, we are going to have a rebroadcast of this session on March 4th. It will be a live session, but it will be the same content. And so, you know, if you've watched tonight and you haven't completed your FAFSA and you get that done and you want to come back just to kind of do a review, that's great. And that will be available at facebook.com/My Schools. As I mentioned, we're also going to have this presentation in Spanish on March 9th, and that is going to be available, and that's at 7 p.m., available at facebook.com/PCSB Espanol. And I also want to make sure you're aware that St. Pete College is hosting some virtual FAFSA nights, and in fact, one is tomorrow night. So if you have not completed the FAFSA and you really think I need some help with this process, I strongly encourage you to attend one of these events. Ideally, as we've mentioned, is the sooner you do this, the better, so tomorrow night would be great. If you go to our website, pcsb.org/FAFSA, you'll see in the top right-hand corner under upcoming events, there is a link that says FAFSA, fill it out, and that will take you to a flyer that has a link to register. So you do need to register, but you can register up till tomorrow. And even if you've completed your FAFSA and you just think, I just want to talk to a professional and go over like what I see and off, you know, get some individual advice, that's a great opportunity. And they do have a couple events later on. And lastly, we are going to have, so this has kind of been a series, I guess, of FAFSA sessions, and on March 31st, we're going to have our final in the series, and we'll be covering understanding and analyzing your award letters. So this will let you know, now that you've completed your FAFSA, now you're going to get your college award letters. Try it again. And you'll be able to, you know, we'll walk you through that process. Also, just kind of let you know some of those final things you need to do so that you're all prepared for when you're starting college. So I want to thank everybody for attending this evening's session. We hope that you found it helpful. To find out more about events like this, be sure to subscribe and follow us on all social media platforms. And thanks and good night.